Hey everyone, it's been a while. I'm here to give you an update on Esports Earnings, as well as my new website, Let's Play Index. I've been busy developing these websites and acquiring the hardware to run them, so I'll begin by showing off my new server rack. This is the infrastructure powering Esports Earnings and Let's Play Index. It's only a half rack, but it's more than enough space for what I need at the moment, and it's not as expensive as I thought. I noticed every time a major event happened, Esports Earnings would slow to a crawl. I had to do something about it, and at the same time I was also trying to do a rewrite of the data entry forms and the underlying foundation of the website. This wasn't a simple fix and I couldn't just tack it on, and I can't just continue upgrading hosting packages. That and a few other reasons is why I moved away from my web hosting service and onto my own servers in a data center. I'd never done this before either, so the experience itself was well worth it. AWS and Azure turned out to be more expensive in the long run, which is why I didn't go with it. At least more expensive with the architecture I'm building out for both of these sites. I'll use it eventually when I have to use servers in other parts of the world. At this point, I have all the hardware I need for Esports Earnings. Let's Play Index, on the other hand, is another beast altogether. The entire dataset for Esports Earnings fits into 32 GB of RAM, whereas Let's Play Index already has 160 GB split across multiple databases, and other supporting services to ensure the site runs smoothly. I do need to reconfigure some of the hardware since now I can consolidate some of these servers into one machine and reassign the hardware to do things I still need to get done. I still have a lot to learn, but I already have a plan for growth for both of these sites, so once I start to get more traffic and need to build out the features that require their own servers, I can do that very easily, and I have the money to pay for it. So now that the hardware is no longer an issue for Esports Earnings, I can focus on the software, and for the last 2 years I was fixing many problems with it. I made a few critical mistakes in its initial design that worked perfectly fine with small amounts of data, like selecting players from a drop-down menu. But I had to change it because in some instances, the drop-down menus could use upwards of 10 megabytes worth of memory and bandwidth. If left unaddressed, the forms would continue to waste huge amounts of resources on both the client and server. It'll continue to work until it doesn't. I had to deal with it sooner or later, and that's exactly what I did in 2018. The changes I've made to the database include autocomplete functionality, and I've changed the forms to use it so that a much smaller selection of players would be sent, and it would make things much more efficient overall. I also added a lot of JavaScript so that more of the data was stored in memory and rendered client-side, and that reduced the load on the server. There was also a huge issue with the publishing queue. For those who don't know, when we make changes to the site, those changes are sent to the publishing queue where I review them to make sure it has everything it needs. Basically, I could not approve any changes while all of the numbers were still being calculated, and this used to take around 30 minutes. So I had to rewrite the publishing queue so that instead of applying the changes immediately, the changes were simply flagged to be published and then automatically published once everything was calculated, and everything starts all over again. So it's a queue of sorts for publishing inside of the publishing queue. In the new environment with a new publishing queue code and a dedicated database server, it takes less than a minute. So that takes care of the issue, and we also have plenty of room to grow. I rewrote large portions of the site in the last 2 years, and if you're just browsing it, you probably wouldn't notice any changes. The work I've done focused on things under the hood, and it may not seem like much from the outside, but I've noticed a huge improvement in performance, and it fixed a lot of the problems that would continue to get worse if left unaddressed. I think it was definitely worth the effort. This allows me to look ahead and focus on adding new features. As for Let's Play Index, the hard part is done. The site automatically checks the YouTube API for new videos, and right now it does the job very well. I was having trouble in the beginning because I had never worked with so much data before in my life. We're talking about 70 million videos across 150,000 channels and growing. Not the videos themselves, but the metadata and statistics. Around 25,000 videos are added every single day. I learned the hard way that you should never be storing so much data on a single server, especially when it only has 64 GB of RAM, so I need to replace it with something more suitable for the dataset. Since then, I moved the metadata onto its own server, and that alleviated a lot of the problems with performance, and I have a copy of it in a small Elasticsearch cluster so I can do really quick searches against the data. Now it comes down to processing the data internally and associating each video to a game. At this point in time, I'm pretty much ignoring categories and platforms. Games are much more important because that's the most useful data being aggregated, and that's what people really want to know. Unfortunately, it's catching more than just gaming channels. Music channels like the Vivo channels are somehow getting added. Non-gaming channels are supposed to be disabled because they almost never have video game related content, so we save resources by ignoring these channels when adding or updating videos. I still need to build out the functionality to filter out thousands of these channels, so the only thing I can do at this point is disable them manually. Eventually, what I'd like to do is alleviate much of that load from the main database by offloading pre-computations onto their own servers and split the load between them. This way, updates to the site's numbers can become much faster and it'll be working with the most recent data possible. Automation can only take you so far, so like Esports Earnings, I would eventually like people to contribute their own corrections. The search functionality at this time is being used internally to make corrections to videos. This will be expanded later on to allow users to perform their own searches, to find videos on the site and other things YouTube doesn't allow you to do, such as keyword research for specific games. I need to make sure I have the hardware to support this, and then I can build it out. I'm also beginning to roll out information on game monetization, so you'll be able to tell at a glance if a developer or publisher allows you to monetize a game on YouTube, as well as the requirements and restrictions for doing it. More features that can benefit to the community are still in the works. Eventually, I'll be looking into virtualizing some of these workloads, because I'm reaching the limits in terms of power and space in the server rack. If I can consolidate a few of these servers onto VMs within a single machine, I'll be able to add more powerful machines for the features that need them. So that's pretty much what I've been focusing on these last few years. I've been learning about server hardware, how to source it, what to install on them, and so on. The days where I had Apache and MySQL on a single virtual machine are long gone. Now I have 13 servers with each of them doing one thing, and I'm still learning about all the different ways you can use them. So now I'm going to talk about a few different things I've been experiencing in the industry and how it's going to affect the work I do going forward. As some of you out there already know, we've had a lot of venture capital firms and angel investors coming into esports and pouring millions of dollars into different teams and organizations. Some of these organizations have been trying to acquire existing assets within esports. So I want to say this straight away, and I want to make this very clear to everyone. Esports Earnings is not for sale. I've been given a few sales pitches in the last few years. The highest offers I got were 7 figures. But that doesn't matter. Not only was I never interested in selling the site, I'm also not impressed with the offers I got. For one thing, there's something about hearing a sales pitch at 3 in the morning that really turns me off. Yeah, I get it's close to lunchtime in Europe, but I'm on the west coast of North America. But even then, I noticed that these pitches tend to sound the same. We're passionate about esports. This is what we're doing in esports. We have millions of dollars in venture capital, blah blah blah. Oh, by the way, we're losing money on our projects. But we'd still like to buy your site. Because nothing makes me harder than losing lots and lots of money. These companies have venture capital, they have investors, and basically find ways to acquire the funding to invest in or straight up purchase things like my site. I don't have the capital that they do, but you know what I do have? Positive cash flow. You kinda need that to continue operating. I don't lose money, and part of it is because I never put myself in a position where I would potentially lose money. I play it safe, I never bite off more than I can chew, and I make sure all of my bills are paid. In the years I've been operating Esports Earnings, there's been a lot of companies that have came and went, a lot of teams that were founded and disbanded, a lot of websites trying to do something in esports and disappeared. Esports Wikis is the one that really stuck out in my mind. In 2017, the CEO of Gamers published an article about Esports Wikis and the amount of money they invested and got in return. He said that in 2016, the company invested $270,000 across wages, architecture, and server expenses, and he tweeted out that he only got back $5,000 in ad revenue. Now, I'm not going to be as transparent as him, but these numbers have always bothered me because in 2016, I generated around double the ad revenue with half of the traffic of Esports Wikis. They were doing something terribly wrong if they only made $5,000 in ad revenue. And we have around the same ad block rate. I mentioned this somewhere before, but I don't care if you use ad block. A lot of malware these days are delivered through ads, and you should be protecting yourself. That should come first. I encourage you to whitelist the site, but what I'd really like you to do is link back to it because you'd effectively be sending me to people who don't use AdBlock. But that still doesn't explain how I got more ad revenue with them with less traffic. So anyway, we have a lot of these companies with a hell of a lot more money than I have. They blew their load, they're downsizing, or they're gone already, and yet I'm still standing. And now a few of them want a piece of me. I can see on PR Newswire or other websites that they've secured another round of funding or they brought another investor on board. I don't need their money. If I really wanted to, I can build a deck and pitch like everyone else. I just don't want to. There was a point in time when I was seriously considering these offers. I mean, it's really tempting to get paid a few $1,000,000. I wanted time to think about it because it's the only project I have in esports. But then articles about some of these companies were being published, projects were getting shut down, people were getting laid off. They were too ambitious and spent too much money on things that didn't really matter. And I thought to myself, that could have been esports earnings. Makes me glad I was patient. So now I'm going a different route. This website will grow slowly and organically, and it will continue to exist in the future. I've seen what happened with Gotfrag. That's a substantial part of video game history on that site, and it's gone forever. I'd like to avoid that. At this point, these sales offers are just annoying. I know it sounds strange to call these 7-figure offers annoying, but I've made up my mind. I mean, it's nice to know that if I ever decide to cash out of esports, I'd be a multi-millionaire. Reinvest those millions into other assets, and I'd be set for life. Who knows how I'll feel about this 2 to 3 decades down the road. All I can do is hope I don't regret it. But you know what? Playing the game is a hell of a lot more fun. So through Esports Earnings, I'm going to start doing more to contribute to esports. A while back, I sponsored the Esports Earnings Casters Invitational for StarCraft 2 casters, and it was awesome. It feels great to make something like that possible, and I'd like to sponsor more tournaments in the future. There's just one problem. I don't have the money to do it. The money I do have is being reserved for more servers, so of course I can't do sponsorships without the money to do them. So how do I get the money? I'm avoiding venture capital and outside investors. I'm not taking out loans to sponsor something. Ad revenue is good, but not that good. It's enough to keep the site alive and build out the infrastructure, maybe go to a couple of events, but that's really it. So if I do find a way to generate more money from the site, then we'll eventually run into the issue of me not paying anyone to contribute. As far as I can tell, there's 2 sides to this issue right now in esports. On one side, we have volunteers. They can come in and they contribute to the site. And the ad revenue can be put towards paying for things like domains, rent, things like that. This is what's happening right now, and this works and will continue to work. But I think we can do better than that. On the other side is paying people a salary to work on the site. I don't want to do that. I think that's where a lot of these projects in esports run into problems. They just don't have the cash flow to support these salaries, and they eventually disappear, and no one gets a salary. I need to avoid that. So, what's in the middle? The idea I have is to make it a side hustle. Contributors retain their volunteer status, but the idea here is that they will be given the opportunity to earn as little or as much money as they want based on the additions and changes they make to the site. They continue working whatever jobs they have in real life, but they'll be given an opportunity to earn some extra cash on the side. It's not going to be funded through Patreon or GoFundMe or some shit like that, but the amount contributors will earn will scale based on the revenue generated, and that guarantees the site will continue to operate even if it fails horribly. I haven't finalized anything just yet, and I don't want to give out many details, but I will say that I intend to monetize the API. There's quite a few organizations out there who are using the API already. Organizations with money. So I'm sure they'll be okay paying up. Those who are using the API already will be grandfathered in, meaning their projects will continue to work no matter what. They'll just be limited to the functions that exist already. But once it becomes monetized, it will have a lot more functionality and there will be servers exclusive to API access. So Esports Earnings wouldn't go down from scripts flooding the API with requests. The API servers could go down, but not the site itself. In addition to being able to pay contributors, having another revenue stream also means I have more money to work with. Then I can do those sponsorships and buy new servers or other awesome things in esports. I'm reinvesting that money and contributing to the growth of esports. Even though it's a drop in the ocean, I'd still like to play a part. And I'm designing this in a way that, in the worst case scenario, nothing happens. Volunteers will continue to contribute to the site as usual, and the ad revenue will continue to support the site. But it's something I've wanted to do for a very long time, because with the amount of time and effort it takes to keep everything up to date, they really should be receiving some sort of compensation. I used to stay up all night just adding FGC weeklies or search for Halo tournaments that may or may not have existed. It really is a long and tedious process, no matter what you do to try and streamline it. The contributors to the site aren't doing it just to be nice to me or because they owe me something. They do it because I developed a website that tracks and calculates all the prize money in esports, and they want this to be kept up to date. But they should be compensated for the work they do, especially after all this time of not getting anything in return. I feel like I should at least try to do something to make that happen. It wouldn't feel right if I monetized the site further and gave them nothing. I'm the one building out the infrastructure, but they're the ones keeping the site up to date. I need the ad revenue to cover all of the expenses, but if I can establish more revenue streams, I can give them a cut. And it needs to be sustainable. And of course, I like having more money. So that's something I intend to implement sometime in the future, after I get the rest of the features for the site up and running. Another thing I want to do is support the communities that I believe have been underserved. Right now, that's Arena FPS. So you can probably guess, I've been playing a children's game known as Diabotical. It's the kind of game that I've played on and off for over 2 decades, but I've never felt so good playing Arena FPS until I played Diabotical. It's not so much the gameplay itself, but rather the engine. Everything under the hood that makes the game so playable and so smooth. Things like multi-threaded input, which means you can aim and shoot independent of the frame rate. I've always liked it when the engines push the hardware to its limits, but Diabotical's engine seems like it focuses on pushing the players to their limits. I haven't been this excited for an FPS game in years. The reason I'm talking about it here is because Diabotical is not just a game I want to play. This is a game I want to support. Remember what I said about sponsorships? Well, imagine Esports Earnings sponsoring Diabotical tournaments. Obviously, I need the money for it. Again, I want to do something sustainable so I can continue doing it over and over again. And it's not just monetary support. I believe I've also identified a key problem that's going to prevent Diabotical from succeeding. It's a problem that's affected Arena FPS games for over a decade, and it doesn't seem to be crossing anyone's minds. That problem is the lack of core influencers. You search for Diabotical content on YouTube during the closed beta, and you barely get anything. I know XQC and Forzen each had some videos, but I don't see any content creators with 6-figure subs who focus hard on Arena FPS. I know it was only a closed beta, but I expected to see a lot more videos. I expected to see more duels, more frag videos, more matches, like more everything. For newcomers to be interested in the scene, there needs to be entertaining content that showcases the players' skills, their storylines, what's happening with the community. It's what happened with console Call of Duty and Optic Gaming when there were very few competitions. They just focused on growing their own fan base so that when competitions did happen, there were people watching them and creating that desire to play the game too. I've seen content creators posting their Diabotical videos on Reddit, and one thing that stood out to me was that they rarely filled out the metadata properly. That is, the title, description, and tags of their video. Metadata is how YouTube indexes the videos in their search engine. It's how it figures out what to return in search results and related videos. If you don't put the word Diabotical in the title of your video, nobody will find it. The only views that video will get is from the Reddit post. Arena FPS as we know it just isn't being seen by the general gaming population, but that's only half of the problem. The other half is when they do see Arena FPS videos. Not naming any names, but what they usually see are influencers, and especially game reviewers with 6-figure subscribers who grew up with these games, jumping around like a fucking idiot, moving very slowly around the map, and sticking with one weapon until it's out of ammo. From the perspective of these viewers, especially the younger and more impressionable viewers who never experienced these games back in the day, that's all they'll know about these games. They're not watching Rafa or Cypher playing the game. They're not seeing what people in the community are doing outside of the game. They're listening to people who have no idea what Arena FPS is, telling them what Arena FPS is. How many of you in esports even watch game reviews on YouTube? I'd say almost none of you. If you're involved in esports and you want to play another game, you just go and play it. At most, you'll look at Steam reviews or anything you see along the way to get the game. I don't think there's any cross-pollination here because if you're involved in esports, you tend to stick with the few games you enjoy already and focus on the communities for those games. So we end up with influencers over here spewing a bunch of ignorant noob shit to their followers, and we have the Arena FPS community over here who have no idea this is going on. The reason I know about this problem is because I was a game reviewer myself, and I also want to address my subscribers about why I stopped making reviews. I mainly did these retro reviews of games from the 90s, but I've also done recent games as well. I've been trying to address this problem for years through the way I present the review. I didn't simply talk about the games themselves, I talked about its history and influence, the mods for the game, what people did with the game, and what they did outside of the game to support the community. I talk about these things because that's what we did in the 90s. When we're talking about these games, we're talking about a time in history where LAN parties became a thing. Doom's multiplayer was a huge deal. It's the game that popularized the term deathmatch. It's a major factor in the game being installed on more computers than Windows 95. I talk about these things because I think people, and especially the younger generations of gamers, they need to understand how the community interactions made these games popular, so they can replicate it in the games we have today. It is really easy for someone to say that they grew up playing these games, but if you did grow up with these games like I have, it's really easy to tell when someone hasn't. It honestly seems to me like a lot of these reviewers downloaded the game off of GOG, played the hell out of it, and then somehow retroactively grew up with the game. You can tell because they never learned the skills we learned from being involved in the community, or did the things we did at the time. All they can really talk about is the contents of the games themselves. Here's what I did with these games back in the day. I was in the Quake Team Fortress clan. We used IRC and ICQ to talk to each other. I made maps for many of these FPS games from the 90s. I was a StarCraft and Warcraft 3 modder. I entered tournaments for many of these games. Many of my subscribers know this from my videos already, but there's something else I haven't mentioned on this channel, or my previous one. Back in the early 2000s, I was heavily involved in a game called Dance Dance Revolution. I was posting on DDR Freak when that site was active. We arranged meetups at the local arcade on the forums, and I got to hang out with the players in my area. Every time I'm heavily involved with a game, it's always because there's a strong community behind it. When I first began making reviews in 2007, there was a game reviewing community here on YouTube. People like Silent Rob, Armic21, Gaming Goose, Boo Kitty, Aqualung, Wizwar, and a bunch of others that I forgot about. These days, there's not much of a community and more of individuals doing their own thing. It was great while it lasted. That's why in my reviews, I made it a point to talk about the community and what the players did with the game and what they're going to do with it in the future. Some people have told me I need to stop talking about communities. They think they're not important to the game. Those people need to sit the fuck down and listen. It's not the game itself that's important, believe it or not. The game is just a program at the end of the day. It's just a tool we use to have fun. What people did with it is what really matters. It's about the history, the culture, the community, like everything that the game led to, not the game itself. That's something I learned from being involved in these communities in the 90s, and it's stuck with me ever since. We're the ones making the game fun, and we share that fun with others. That's where I came up with the name GGBeyond. It stands for Good Game Beyond. Thinking beyond the game, because that's what we do. We don't just look at the game itself, we look at what we can do with the game. We look at how we can mod the game, how to organize events around the game, how to make a positive impact and make the game more enjoyable for everyone. As the saying goes, it's better to give than to receive. I'm sure many of you have heard that at some point in your lives, but what this means is, if you enjoyed something so much that you want others to experience it as well, you find ways to give back to the community that's given you so much. Other reviewers don't mention the things that I've been bringing up, and it's because all they look at is the game itself. our experiences are completely different. I feel like I was the only reviewer out there who played Unreal Tournament in a tournament. We play these games very differently than how you see other reviewers play it, and we're able to tell very easily who's played in a tournament and who hasn't. How many reviewers use the E, R, and F keys for weapon bindings? If you're playing a fast-paced FPS where you're switching weapons frequently, you can't reach over and press 8. Your weapons have to be close to WASD so you can easily switch to them. I've seen quite a few of these reviewers over the years criticize games for requiring you to constantly switch weapons. That's a problem with the player, not the game, especially a PC game where you can easily rebind the weapons to something more convenient. They talk about the fast movement in these games, yet they never use the fast movement mechanics. They never strafe jump, they never do the 90-degree sideways dodge moves to move forward, they never rocket jump or other movement mechanics that players discovered. I've seen players moving faster in professional Call of Duty matches than a reviewer playing Doom or Quake. Arena FPS games are failing to attract a younger audience, and I think a major reason is because the people they're watching who play these games don't have the knowledge or skills to show them what these games are about. Reviewers are telling them how fast-paced the game is, yet their viewers are seeing the slow-paced action in these reviews, they see the boring and generic gameplay, and that makes them more likely to be turned off by arena shooters. I've known about this problem with reviewers not understanding Arena FPS for at least a decade, but it wasn't until 2017 when Quake Champions was released that I realized this was having a negative effect on the community. A lot of reviewers who supposedly grew up with the games don't really understand them at all, and I also realized that personalities within Arena FPS don't have as many followers as them. It's sad to see this because a major part of video game history and culture doesn't get passed on to the younger audiences. People were discovering these glitches with Quake and the engine itself, and that's why we have all these different movements, and everyone took advantage of them in competitions, in speedruns, and later on, maps would be designed with that in mind. We were pushing the limits of what we can do with these games. Just look at all the glitches in other games that ended up as mainstay mechanics. Combos in fighting games, quick scoping, fast weapon switching, really anything that involves animation cancelling in the game to give you an edge. WASD controls, like that's Thresh's config. He won John Carmack's Ferrari with it. A lot of you outside of esports take these things for granted, yet you never appreciate where they came from or learn the process of discovering these things in the games we have today. In my reviews of single-player games, I turn up the difficulty as high as I can manage. It's not just to demonstrate my own skill and knowledge of the game, it's how you figure out what's actually useful in the game and what's just a gimmick they added to look cool. You push the game to its limits, you push yourself to your limits, that's how you discover these things. One of the things I learned from experience as a modder is that if you cannot play a particular difficulty, you will not understand how to balance the game at that difficulty or higher. Many game reviewers play at a lower difficulty where everything in the game is viable, so they can spew out any opinion they want, all depending on a narrative they want to push. Sometimes it's based on the compensation from a publisher that they may or may not have disclosed. But more to the point, what do you think will happen when they review Diabotical? I can already imagine all the buzzword-filled reviews, all the 320 UPS movements, all the short-range rails because they don't switch weapons. But their skill level is irrelevant. What they say about a game can influence the sales and ultimately the player base and community of a game, and that's why we call them influencers now. How many fewer copies did Shadow Warrior 2 sell because reviewers criticized the game for its bullet sponges? And how many people realized that those reviewers were using physical damage against enemies that were resistant to physical damage? Using elements against their respective vulnerabilities in that game is how you're supposed to deal with enemies. Developers who work long hours every day for years are being punished in the market because reviewers don't spend a few hours understanding the mechanics of a game they review. But that's exactly how Diabotical will fail if we don't address this problem. The pro players are supposedly the gatekeepers of Arena FPS, yet Quake Champions peaked at 17,000 concurrent players. How can they be the gatekeepers when barely anyone shows up to the gate? The reality is, influencers are the real gatekeepers, not just for Arena FPS, but for most of the games on the market. With the way things are going, it's only a matter of time until game design begins catering to influencers in an effort to appease them and attract more players. So I think that's why this problem has gone under the radar for so long. People involved in esports are just not watching them, and nobody realizes that there are influencers outside of esports who are discouraging new players from coming in. And to be fair, it's probably not intentional. But now that Diabotical is going into open beta soon, it's a problem we now have to deal with, and I think it's important to get a spotlight on it and make the Arena FPS community aware of it before it's too late. I don't know if the game will succeed even if we address this problem, but I do know that if we don't address this problem, Diabotical will fail. These established influencers should not get to define what these games are about. But the reality is they have hundreds of thousands of followers who will take them at their word. It doesn't matter how good you are at a game, how much technical knowledge and experience you have. You could be quoting game developers from a game design book like this one, and it's completely wrong when it goes against their opinion, which ultimately becomes the popular opinion. It's hive mind mentality. The only thing that matters is having enough people who are willing to listen to you. That's what these influencers have, and that's what Arena FPS needs. No one in the Arena FPS community has that large of a following. The largest I've seen was DDK with 22,000 subs, and it's mainly because of his CSGO videos. Cypher has a few hundred. Rafa doesn't even have a YouTube channel. Outside of personalities, the biggest Arena FPS channels are uploading QuakeCon matches, and those channels are not that big. For Diabotical to have a chance to succeed, that needs to change. We can't rely on Twitch alone, and a lot of you have already seen how low the viewership was during the closed beta. We need influencers within the Arena FPS community who can grab those six-figure subscriber numbers on YouTube, who can show the younger and impressionable players how exciting and in-depth these games can be. We need content creators who can put that gameplay in front of them. And I cannot stress enough, we need to do this specifically on YouTube. It's the biggest video sharing platform in the world, and I'm surprised at how much it's been neglected by the Arena FPS community. There's quite a few content creators out there already, and even though they only have a few hundred or a few thousand subs, they already know how to edit their videos and make really interesting content. I think we just need to teach them how the YouTube algorithm and YouTube SEO works in order to put themselves out there. The good news is, that's the easy part. You're really just filling out a form for every video you upload to YouTube. Once they learn how to fill out the form properly, they can go from there and really start to build their audience. One of the things I've been doing for a very long time is trying to see everything from as many different perspectives as possible. We have a younger generation of gamers who never experienced these games from the 90s. Think about what it is they're seeing when they see Arena FPS. They're watching game reviews. They're looking at their favorite non-pro players. They begin following them because they found them in games outside of Arena FPS. It's easy to say that Arena FPS is just a niche genre and it'll never go back to its former glory. It's easy to blame Arena FPS itself for its difficulty. What I love about esports is that we don't simply complain about our problems. We do something about them. If there's something we want to do, something we want to make happen, we go out and we do it. People in esports carries that same attitude and work ethic that we had in the 90s that made Doom and Quake grow as popular as it did. And it's basically why esports is as big as it is today. I know this is a problem, I have a solution, and now I'm going to implement it. I'm writing articles that cover this topic on influencers and how to build a YouTube channel in more detail, and those should be published in the coming days. I just wanted to talk about it briefly in this video. Briefly meaning several minutes. I'll provide information on how Arena FPS content creators can build their channels quickly, and if time permits, I'll try to work with these content creators one-on-one. Building Arena FPS channels on YouTube is the goal here, and they'll be the primary vehicle for bringing new players into the community, as well as address the misinformation from established influencers. And like I said, I want to support this game. We can't rely on people like Ninja to stream the game. We can't wait for a large corporation to prop up the scene. Epic Games is providing, I believe, 2 years worth of funding. That's great, but it's ultimately the people in the community who are responsible for the growth of Arena FPS. This means Diabotical's success will be the result of a grassroots movement, and we have 2 years to do it. So we need to step up. and I mean all of us. That includes me. This is the reason why I made this video. I'm reactivating this channel. What's the point of me telling people how to build a channel if I can't even do it myself? I lead by example. Over the years, whenever someone asked me for help on building their channel, I explain YouTube SEO to them and point them to different resources like the YouTube Content Creators Playbook and good videos on the subject. We help them out to encourage them to do something in the community, and we hope they make a positive impact. I've helped a few people over the years with varying degrees of success. I've done something like that in every community I was involved in. The number one rule to know is that content is king, and uploading a piece of content every single day is essential for your channel to grow quickly. I could never do that making game reviews because I take the time to focus on mechanics and features that people generally don't care about, and I discover things that other reviewers don't pick up on. But I make it a point to talk about those things because people within those communities would understand that it's what ultimately makes the game enjoyable, and everyone outside those communities needs to know it. The most successful reviewers out there do not spend a lot of time playing the games they review. They have to move on to other games so they can give their opinion on them and get more videos out there for the YouTube algorithm. It's also why they suck at the games they review, and I've noticed over the years that people are slowly starting to get sick and tired of reviewers as a result, in addition to the other things I won't go into in this video. That's why I stopped making reviews. At the end of the day, you're just giving an opinion. Nobody cares what that opinion is based on. That means the years of experience I have as a modder and level designer mean absolutely nothing. The years I've spent in esports and understanding the games at the pro level are irrelevant. I used to think we were all gamers and we need to stick together, but the reality is our cultures and values are very different. My values align with LAN and arcade culture, that face-to-face interaction between players who share the same interests as you, and caring about other people's fun and enjoyment of a game. We may be playing the same games, but we look at them and play them very differently. It's difficult to be very opinionated when you have a technical focus on the games and you're pushing the limits on what you can do with them. But lots of people just wanted me to conform to the popular opinion, even when my own skills will go against it and I can show it on video. And they'll use any excuse they can get their hands on to divert attention away from the fact that they just don't like what I have to say. So I'm pivoting this channel away from game reviews and onto videos which are easier for me to make. Videos where my knowledge and skills are relevant. You can probably guess from Let's Play Index that I'm going to be making Let's Plays. Not every video, but most of them. I've noticed that people who watch Let's Plays are really paying attention to what the player is doing in the game, more so than in reviews or other opinion-oriented videos. It's almost like the way people treat a Let's Play is the complete opposite of a game review. I have so much data on Let's Play channels and a lot of information on how to optimize them, and there's a lot of data on sites like Steam charts that you can use and even achievement data to understand the gaming community at large. In order to build a YouTube channel, you need an assortment of content, so here's a preview of what I'll be uploading to YouTube. Number 1. Warcraft 3 and Warcraft 3 custom maps. Reforged was a terrible remaster, to put it mildly, but it did bring back some players, and I'd like to play some custom maps before the game dies down again. The maps and the community did nothing wrong. The campaigns are still good. What Blizzard did in the past was amazing, and that's what should be remembered. I just want to get this out of the way, deal with the bugs, same thing with StarCraft and StarCraft 2. Get these videos on the channel, and then move on. Number 2. COVID-19 is preventing me from playing a game, so I'll have a limited number of these videos for the time being. That game is DDR. Like I said, I was heavily involved in the game in the early 2000s. I just got back into it last year. I've also noticed many other people out there wanting to get back into it as well, and since there's almost no one uploading these types of videos, it's the perfect opportunity to make them. Number 3. Now that I have a server rack, I spend a lot of time researching and acquiring servers for my 2 websites. I figured I should make videos on my server acquisitions and what I'll be doing with them, maybe a few coding videos as well, since you need the software to take advantage of the hardware. Of course, I have to strike a balance between the information I provide and security. Probably the biggest reason no one else is doing this is because the information can be used by an attacker to compromise the servers. So I'm being very careful about what I reveal to the public, but I think it'll be beneficial to teach people about servers and give them ideas on how they can use them for their own projects. I already spend thousands of dollars on servers and hundreds of hours coding, so I might as well take the extra step to make videos. I have a new server on the way already, so a video on that will be coming soon. Number 4. You've probably figured it out by now. I'll be making diabotical videos. I'm still improving my aim and decision making, among other things. I have a few ideas for videos, and I'll begin implementing them once we get into open beta. For the time being, I still have closed beta gameplay I'll be uploading. Diabotical is the last chance for Arena FPS to see a resurgence, but it's also the best chance we've had in a very long time. I'll try to do my part by working with Diabotical content creators to build their channels. Guys like Bio, who have 150 subscribers at the moment. Within the next 2 years, he needs to have 150,000 subscribers. If that sounds unrealistic, it's probably because it is. We still need to aim in that direction, and we still need to try and get there with as many channels as possible. We have to make sure people can see the game for what it is, and this is the only way I can see this happening. I believe influencers will either make or break the game, not the game itself, so let's make it count. Esports Earnings will focus on esports, and Let's Play Index will focus on YouTube. Both of these websites will play a part in the development of these Arena FPS channels. This channel will also be included in there. I already know how the YouTube algorithm works, or at least as much as any SEO expert knows. I've known this for over a decade. I should be using it for myself, and I will. So I'll begin publishing videos tomorrow. Long story short, I'm trying to find more ways I can contribute to the community, things I can do with the skills and the resources I have. Right now, I'm running 2 websites and the bills are getting paid. Now I'm looking to take it to the next level, and the server rack will open up a lot of possibilities. A lot of people in esports are using the site already to create their own content, so my main priority with Esports Earnings is to continue improving it, finish adding the features that I need to add, and stuff like that. Then there's Let's Play Index, which is continuing to improve as I add more games and more hardware to support upcoming features. And I also need to look into implementing the ideas I talked about in this video. But that's the beauty of not taking money from these investors. I can take my sweet time and prioritize things any way I want. I don't have the answer to anyone. Whether that's a good thing or not, only time will tell. So hopefully you have some insight on what's going on with the websites and where I'm taking them. I think the industry needs more projects like Let's Play Index that can sustain and grow itself. It always bothers me when I hear about these other projects that struggle to pay their bills because they don't receive enough money from Patreon. To me, it seems like these ideas cannot survive in the market by itself. It's the reason why I don't use Patreon and try to find more ways to pay for things. And I think esports needs more of these smaller projects getting bigger like Esports Earnings. It can't all be venture capital or angel investors trying to buy their way into esports. They'll play a big part, but we still need more revenue being generated. We need more cash flow in this space. Esports alone generates over $1 billion a year. Doesn't change the fact that we need to be sustainable and we need to make sure the VC bubble doesn't burst. And I hope I'll be able to do my part to make that happen, however small that may be. I have a lot on my plate already, and it's going to be a lot more, but it's going to be worth it in the long run. And that's all I have to say, so stay safe out there, and thanks for listening to my TED Talk. More videos to come tomorrow.